Okay, welcome everyone. We're holding 2 lines from the bottom of Ayin Beis Amud Beis. 2 lines from the bottom of Ayin Beis Amud Beis. So we had a question. We said that the limb of the fetus, if it sticks out and then you shecht the mother, so according to Rameir, the limb is metame the fetus inside. It's metame maga nevela. And the question was, but it's tumas beis hasasarim. It's attached under the hide, and that's not concealed. That's concealed tumah. So the Gemara gave an answer that when you cut it, the pieces of flesh that come apart are exposed, and that's not tumas beis hasasarim. Ravina has an alternate answer. Ravina says, where did we learn tumas hasasarim? That's by a beged. When you had a beged that was 3 by 3 tvachim and you cut it in half. So we said that one part of the beged doesn't contaminate the other part, tumas medris, because it's concealed tumah, because a fabric is not meant to be cut. However, uber l'chaticha kai. This uber is surely meant to be cut because the piece outside you can't eat and the fetus inside you could eat. So it's meant to be cut. And whatever is meant to be cut, kechatach dami. It's as if it was already cut. And therefore, it's considered like it's exposed. But not everybody holds this idea that which is going to be cut is like it's already cut. As we start the top of Ayin Gimel Amud Aleph. Kaman Reb Meir. This would seem to be only like Reb Meir. Ditnan, kol yodai sakelim shein aruchais. A handle of a keli that's very long. Now, you don't need it to be so long. The handle of the pot doesn't have to be 4 feet long. So, v'asid l'katzitzan, and you're going to eventually cut it down to a 1/2 foot. So, the extra 3.5 feet, which is unnecessary, is not part of the keli, and it's not mekabel tumah. So matfil ad mekayim mida. You only have to be toivel up till the 1/2 foot. So you see, Rameir says that kol ha'imid lachtoi kechatach dami, and therefore you don't have to be toivel it. The Chachamim say no, ad sheyatfil es kulai. You have to be toivel. The whole handle is tamei. You have to be. You see, you don't say kol ha'imid lachtoi kechatach dami. Says the Gemara, by food, even the Rabbanan agree, because food is a bunch of things stuck together. So afilu teim Rabbanan chibure eichlin, the attachment of food is not so strong, even when it's attached. Command the mifrasei dummy. It's like a lot of pieces, and therefore. And therefore, because it's like a lot of pieces, therefore it's considered, it's considered as if it's touching each other in an exposed place, because everybody will agree by food that it's kechatach, even the Rabbana. Now, our Mishnah says that when the uber sticks out its limb and you cut it off, so according to a mayor, it's maga nevela. Now, why does it have to say and you cut it off? So bishleim ula, you have to cut it off because when you cut it, the shreds become exposed, and that's how it's metama the fetus inside. Bishleim ula hainu diktani chatocha. That's why it says you have to cut it. El Ravina, who says that it's kechatach dami, why does the Mishnah have to say that you cut it even when you don't cut it? It's considered like it's cut and it's touching, and it's metame the fetus according to Rameir. El Ravina mai chatocha says the Gemara. You're right. According to Ravina, it only says chatocha. I need the tana reisha chatocha. It says in the reisha that you cut it off because the case in the reisha is where the uber stretched out its hand, and you cut it off, and then you shechted the mother. So then the fetus is tar, because you cut it off before you shechted the mother. So in the meantime, before you shech the mother, the fetus is not a food, and it might even be considered alive like the mother, because it'll be yerachiyamite, and it's not mekabel tuma. But that's only because you cut off the limb before you shechted it. If you shechted it before you cut off the limb, it would be a problem. So since the Reisha had to say chatacha, I did the Tana Reisha chatacha, so Tana Nami say for chatacha. Now, if you remember, the Chachamim say that when it sticks out its limb and you shecht it, the limb is not nevela. Rather, it's a treifa. Just like if you shecht an animal that's a treifa, it takes it out of the nevela. So also when you shecht the animal, the limb doesn't become nevela. The Chachamim Oimrim maga treifa shchuta. It's like touching a treifa shchuta. Now, the problem is, if it's a treifa, so it's not metame, then why does it say maga treifa shchuta? It should say tar. So Mara says it must be that there's a case that a treifa shchuta is metame. That's why it says it's touching a treifa that was shechted. Treifa says treifa shchita mi metame. So now the Gemara tells us a chiddush, which we didn't learn yet in the Masechta, that although when you shecht an animal that has a perforated membrane of the brain, it takes it out of nevela, but it still has a tumah to be metame kachim. Says the Gemara, treifa shchuta mi metamya in kedavu de Shmuel. The Amr Avu the Shmuel treifa sheshachata, a treifa that you shecht metame b'mukdashim. It slaughters in a case where it's kachim. It's metame and it slaughters. It's metame in a case where it's kachim. Now you remember we have a machlokes in the Mishnah between the Rabbanan and Reb Meir. When you shech the mother, does this limb outside have a din of a nevela, or does it have a din of treifa shchuta? So the Rabbanan argue, and they say mamatzinu, just like we find, but treifa shishchitasa and tarasa, then an animal that has a perforated membrane of the brain, you can't eat it. But if you shecht it, it takes it out of its tumas nevela. So af shchitas behema, where this limb came out of the fetus, so you can't eat it, but the shchita helps to tar as a aver. It's matar the aver from tumas nevela. Tanya, Amalem Reb Meir, v'chi mi tiaru la'aver zemi de nevela. Who is matar this limb from nevela? You're saying the shchita of the mother. Shchitas imai, then you should be able to eat it too. Im kein tatirenu ba'achila. So they answered him, well, you shech the treifa, it takes it out of nevela, but you can't eat it. Amulai harba, but that's not what the Gemara answers. The Rabbanan answers something that doesn't seem to have anything to do with what Reb Meir says. Amulai harba matzelas al she'ena gufa. shechting the mother helps more for something that's external, yoisim megufa, than something in its own body. Shari Shanina, we learned, if you cut the kidney or the spleen and leave it in the animal, so the din is, if you cut a piece of the uber fetus and leave it in the animal, so it's something that's external. But if you cut from the spleen and the kidney of the animal itself and you shech the mother, now this is true, but what does that have to do with Rameir saying that if Rabbanan, if the shechita is matter the limb from the veil, it should be matter to eat too. What does one thing have to do with the other? My comment, the Gemara says, it doesn't make sense, the give and take over here. So Amar Rava Navimri Lakadi, Rava says, and some say whomsoever said, we're not sure who it is. Chesurei Mechzer, there's something missing over here. There's a piece missing in the dialogue. Vachi Ketani. Amlem Rameyer, the Chimite Arulei Vizemidei Nevela. What's matter this limb from Nevela? You're saying Shritas Imai, the Shrit of the mother, Im Kain Tatirena Bachila, then it should permit it to be eaten too. So they answered, simple answer. Amrulei Treifa Tichiach. Treifa will disprove you. Shet Shritasam Mitaresa Midei Nevela. The Shrit of a Treifa is matared from Nevela, but Veina Matirasa Bachila doesn't permit it to be eaten. So Amalahan, so he said, well, how could you compare this limb to a treifa? Amalam loy, im tiarta shchitas treifa isa. If when you shech the treifa, it's matared from the nevela, because that is, you're doing it to the animal itself. Davishi gufa. Tataras eva, but shechting the mother, how could it be matar? The limb, which is not part of the mother, davar she'eina gufa, so don't compare it to a treifa. So Rabban say adarabba, when it's something that's not part of the mother, it's easier for it to be matter. Amrulai harba matzelos al she'eina gufa yoisim gufa. It's quicker to save something that's not from its body than from its own body. Like we learned, Shari Shaninu, if you cut a piece of the fetus and leave it inside, and shech the mother mutabachila. But if you shech a piece of the spleen or the kidney of the own animal and leave it inside asabachila, so you see it's matter more something that's not part of it than something that is part of it. So surely if it's matter the treifa itself, it should be matter the limb that belongs to the fetus that comes out. Tanya Nami Hachi, we learned likewise, but although we learned likewise, this is going to introduce a new subject to us, one of the harder subjects in Masechtas Chulin, the subject of Eiver Amaduldal, a limb that's hanging. Tanya Namihachi, Amalehem Remeir, V'chimi tiaru le'eiver zemidei neveli. According to your position, Chachamim, what's matter this limb from nevela? Amrulai, so they said, Shchitas imai, the shchita of the mother, im kain, if so, tatirena b'achila, it should permit it to be eaten. Amrulai, so they said to him, no, treifa techiach. Treifa is permitted, it takes off the tumas of but it's not permitted to be eaten. Sheshchitas mitaresim idei nevela, ve'ena matirasa b'achila. Amalahan, so Rameir says, Im tiharta shchifa treifa osa. If shchita takes off nevela from an animal that's a treifa, or ve'esa eiver hamiduldulba, or it takes off the nevela from a limb that's dangling. If you shut the animal and there's a limb that's dangling, you can't eat that limb, but it takes off the isser of the tumah of nevela. That's because davar shit gufa. Tatar as a uber, should it be matar, the limb of the uber, she'ena gufa? So Amrulai, this is like we said, this is the Tanya Nami Hachi. Harba matzelas al she'ena gufa yaisim gufa. It helps more for something that's external than something that's internal. You cut off a piece of the fetus and leave it inside, and you shech the mother mutabachila because it's an external item. But from the spleen or the kidney of the animal, and you shech the mother, it's asur. Now, the Gemara is going to focus on this halacha of Ever Hamiduldal. Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish, Kemachloikis be'ubarin, like there's a machloikis between the Chachamim and Meir, whether the shchita takes off the tumas nevela by the limb that comes out. Kach machloikis be'evarin. So there's a machloikis with a dangling limb, that according to the Chachamim, the tumah goes off. According to Reb Meir, it doesn't. Now this is a contradiction to what we learned before. But the Gemara is going to talk about that. Rabbi Yochanan Amar, Machloikis be'ever de uber. The Machloikis is only with the limb that comes out. Aval be'ever de behema, dangling limb, divrei akol shchita oisenipel. Everybody holds that when you shecht it, it's considered like it's detached, like it fell off, and it's not matarid from the veil. Amar Rabbi Yosef Rab Chanina, my time at Rabbi Yochanan and Ali b'd Rabbana. Why did Rabbi Yochanan hold that the limb that comes out, the shchita helps to be matarid, but the dangling, the limb of the fetus, the shchita helps to be matarid, but a dangling limb, the shchita does not help, because hay islay takanta b'chazar. This is Rabbi Yochanan l'shitasai. He holds that a limb that comes out, if it goes back in and you shecht it, the limb is okay. But a dangling limb can never become good again. Now we have a problem over here, because earlier we said in the name of Rav Meir that the shchita of a treifa and a dangling limb, the shchita takes away the tumas nevela. So how do we reconcile that with here, where we said not that way according to Rav Meir? Meisvei amalem Rav Meir loy im tiharta shchitas treifa osa ve'esa ever amadul and the dangling limb. That's davar shegufa. That's something that's attached. Tatar as a uber should be matar, the limb that sticks out. Davar she'ena gufa. So the Gemara says Bishleim Reb Shimon ben Lakish, that at least according to the Rabbanan, a dangling limb, the shchita takes away the tumas nevela. What Reb Meir meant is, according to me, the dangling limb, the shchita doesn't help for the dangling limb either. But the divrayim kamalu, he's arguing, even he's playing devil's advocate. Lididi loishna eva de uba v'loishna eva de behema ke'adadi ninu. The shchita is not matar, the dangling limb either. According to you, however, that say that shchita is matar the dangling limb, that's because it's the body itself. El Rabbi Yochanan kasha, but according to Rabbi Yochanan, that even the Rabbanan hold that a dangling limb, the shchita does not help for. So what did Rabbi Meir mean when he says that the shchita helps with the Avraham Aduldal? So then the Gemara says, according to that, we have to switch around what Rabbi Yochanan said. 4 lines from the top of Ayin Gimel Amid Beis. And I want to welcome in Dr. Guy, our shul. I'm not sure who's in shul, but people that are watching in shul: Saba, Mo Kushner, Mel Zachter, Yaakov Warman, Jay Siegel, Mark Schafel, Reuven Pollack, Eddie Chazan, Shelley Zeitlin, Nachum Umansky, Irving Fishbaum, Nachman Chapler, Shalom Fogel, Dr. Block, Yitzi Fuchs, Benzin Cohn, Chaim Kramer, Harvey, Leiby, Marshall Castle, Gedalia Engel, Michal Avram, Stephen Holtzman, Rebellia Yaffe, Shimon Klein, Gabriel Epstein, Danny Vogel, Ilya Shutman, Rabbi Kranz, and David Helfgott. having a nice crowd here of 33 people. Oh, Kushner, it's good to see you. Therefore, we have to revise it. Eli yitmar hachi yitmar. Amar Reb Shimon ben Lakish, kemachloikis beubarim, kach machloikis beivarim. Like there's a machloikis by the limb, so there's a machloikis also by the limb that sticks out from the fetus. So there's a machloikis with a dangling limb, and then it would be Reb Meir saying l'divrei. Reb Yochanan Amar machloikis be'eved de'uber, aval be'eved de'behema, but by an aver of an animal, divrei akol ein shchita oisenipol. Everybody holds that the shchita does not make it considered as if it was detached. Rather, everybody holds that the shchita is mitarit from the tumah nevela. That would be the opinion of Rabbi Yochanan. So the Gemara says, Amar Rabbi Yosef, Rabbi Chanina, my time with Rabbi Yochanan, alib de Rabbi Meir. Why does he hold that a dangling limb is permitted according to Rabbi Meir, even though the fetus that's limb sticks out is not? So the Gemara says, because high gufa, high love gufa. The dangling limb is part of the body, so even Rabbi Meir agrees that it removes the tumah. The fetus, which is not part of the body, he holds that it doesn't remove the tumah. Okay, now we have to follow closely because it gets a little confusing. Because we're going to add in a new idea about Eiver min achai, a limb from a live animal. Now I have to tell you ahead of time that a limb from a live animal is only tamei if it has 3 ingredients: bone, sinew, and meat. The meat alone from a live animal that's cut off is not tamei. It's only a limb. A limb is comprised of meat, bone, and sinew. So it says Gemara, let's now see. Amar Rav Yitzchak bar Yosef, Amar Rav Yochanan. Hakol moedim shemisa oisenipol. That if there's a dangling limb and the animal dies, so the limb becomes detached and has a din of not nevela, as a din of eva min achai. Makes a difference. Because nevela, even if it's basar, the size of a kazayas, we're going to learn about that in the Mishnah Yomis today, it's matama. But eva min achai is only matama if it has basar, gidin, and etzem. Ve'ein shchita oisenipol. But if you shecht it, that does not make it considered to be detached. And we said that according to Rabbi Yochanan earlier, we said that when you shecht it, it does not have a din of nevela, even according to Rameh. Now, b'may askinan, ilema be'eved uber. We're not talking about a limb that comes out from an uber, because the limb that comes out of an uber, that's a machlokes Rabban Rameh, miflip kligi. Ela be'eved behema. We're talking about the limb of an animal. So the Gemara says, what's the chiddush over here? We learned both these things. Misa tanina, that when it dies, it makes it nipul, it makes it like it's detached. Shchita tanina, and we learned it by shchita. Misa tanina, we learned it by misa. Mesa behema, if the animal dies. So if there's dangling flesh, now that dangling flesh is considered detached. And since it's considered detached, it's not eva min achai because it's only flesh. So flesh doesn't have tumah. If you want it to be tamei, it has to be moistened. Habasar tzorech hechsher. V'aver, But if it's a limb, so it has meat, bone, and sinew, then that already is Eva Menachai. Mitame Mishim Eva Menachai. Ve'ena Mitame Mishim Eva Menachai. It's Mitame as an Eva Menachai, which we said is only if it has meat, bone, and sinew. It's not Mitame Mishim Eva Menachai. If it's Nevela, it doesn't have to have meat, bone, and sinew. Shchita Nami Tanina. We learned also by Shchita. Nishchata behema. If the animal is shechted, so we said that according to Rabbi Yochanan, it's metarid from Tumas Nevela. Hochshiru b'dameha. The dangling piece is muchshel lekabel tuma by the blood of the animal. Even though the blood of the animal doesn't reach the piece, but since it's still part of the animal, so it's muchsher agav the blood of the animal. Divrei Meir. Reb Shimon lo yochsheru. Reb Shimon says since the blood doesn't touch it, it's not hochsher. Says the Gemara, Imiahi, if it was only from that, Havamina, I might think my hochsheru. It's not talking about if it was a whole limb. Maybe the shchita makes the limb detached and has din of Eva Menachai. It's talking about abasar. Says the Gemara, hochsheru ketani. It says in the plural. Says the Gemara, one is for meat that separates from the animal, just a dangling piece of meat. Meat that separates from the aver. Maybe the aver is aver menachai, but meat that separates from it needs to be moksher. Says the Gemara, if it's meat, so it doesn't have a tumah of aver menachai, what's the difference if it was just meat dangling from the animal or meat that's separated from a limb? I might think that since that meat was attached to Eva Menachai that had a tumah daraisa, I might think that even if the meat separates, it doesn't need hechsher. So since it had a tumah chamura when it was attached, when it becomes detached, I might think it doesn't need to be muksher. Kamash malan, that if it becomes detached, it needs hechsher. Wow, this was not for the faint-hearted. This was not easy, although I know learning these Gemaras makes Marshall always very hungry. He hears about dangling limbs, and he thinks about, chops and all kinds of things. But most of us...
days are coming, I think.
Okay, so you'll break out the lasagna and the blintzes and the lattes. I know you.
The salmon.
Okay, Rabbi, say now we're going to do the Mishnah Yomis.